Fantastic, and welcome back to Curious Faith. We're so glad to have you join us for these questions and conversations for those people thinking about following Jesus again. I'm the host, Bill Wallace. I've got two great guests here with me today. Super excited for this particular conversation. This is, I think going to be hopefully a really interesting one. And I'm curious as to feedback on that for those people both within the church and people kind of outside the church, because I think this gets to some of the questions people have that honestly they ask of me, and I don't always have a good answer. So I'm looking for a good answer here today from my two guests. Let's welcome them in.
No
Hello,
pressure
guest.
for the good answer.
None whatsoever. Just sit back and relax. Hey, for people who are watching or listening, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. So I'm Ryan Brown. I'm the Executive Director of Link Northwest and a mission developer at Faith Lutheran Church up in Lakewood, Washington.
Excellent.
I'm Eric Samuelson. I'm a Lutheran pastor. I'm serving Faith Lutheran in North Marysville and Freeborn Lutheran in Stanwood, and I'm a leadership coach, and that's what I do for a lot of the rest of my time.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, guys, so much for being a part of this. Really excited about this. Ryan, who has been here before, but Eric, a first-time guest. Appreciate that. I always like to do a question just to get to know folks a little bit. I thought this one might be most appropriate just for our particular crowd here. And I'll answer it first because I thought of the question. When did you notice the first gray hair? I thought we would start with that one. So I'll answer first. I'll feel free to do that. Honestly, I noticed the first one was just freshly out of my 20s. So I wasn't gray in my 20s, but I was 30, 31 when I noticed there were a couple coming in. And I thought, that's cool, I can handle this. And by like early 30s, man, I just thought, golly, come on. Really? We'll go to you, Eric.
All right. Well, so I was about 35, and it's the beard.
Oh, it was the beard, yes.
There was one, and that one grew twice as fast
No, for real?
as the rest. So it was always way longer. If I kept it trim, you wouldn't see it. The beard is not trimmed right now, and it's mostly gray. So, yeah, and they just keep coming and coming. So.
There you go. I feel you.
And this question feels really loaded because
What?
we just had that
No,
conversation.
not at all, right?
But so just a couple years ago, so about 35, same, and I'm seeing them in my mustache right here. There's a few that come in, but most recently, as in like days ago, I found a few in my hair here, and I'm blaming none other than the Honorable Pastor Bill for that one. He actually called it out at an event, and I was like, "No, come on! I didn't knock on wood." It is what it is. It's not my three children.
No.
It's
certainly not.
it was our conversation.
It was absolutely. I cursed you, and I feel really glad about that.
Good stuff.
Cool. Thanks, guys, for coming and being a part of this. Our question for today is it time for the church to sell out? And we always have a little bit of tongue-in-cheek with these questions. So really what I'm getting at there is I see more and more churches with a fair amount of land, with pretty good-sized buildings, and honestly, this is a question that now I'm seeing asked within the community around me for people who don't go to church, who drive by these, who see these huge, big buildings with large parking lots that sit empty a whole lot of the time, and they're asking the question, "What are you guys doing?" You know, it's great that you're filled on Sunday morning. Even that, we can maybe have a conversation about that. But you've got so much space. What are you doing? And so I wanted to have a conversation with those of us who have, been doing this a little bit of time, but also I think have been now in some situations where we've seen some of those churches. You know, we've been able to either be in ministry or partner with or see some of those churches that have buildings where it's a fair question. Hey, is it time to sell? Is it time to do something else? Is it time to be creative in ministry? What's going on there? Not just for that church, but quite honestly, from a community perspective. Part of what we do here is, for people that are thinking about joining a church, I get that from people that aren't just not thinking about joining a church. They're thinking, why would I join? You guys only do things for an hour a week. So there you go.
And I think that also contributes to people's skepticism of institution in general. It's like, we might have all of this thing that we do on Sunday morning, but you're wasting 6 days out of the week. Why should I trust that? Why should I become a part of that? So
Yeah.
I think it's a great question.
Yeah. Cool. Got a great answer?
I mean, I think I've got a lot of things to say on the issue. I think we both do. I mean, I've seen churches that have they really are the epitome of that. They function kind of briefly on a Sunday morning, and then they consider, their mild Bible studies during the week their big thing, and the rest of the time it just sits empty, and they don't have preschools, or they don't have community partners that are coming in during the week, and it's an awful lot of wasted square footage, and just property in general. From my angle, I think what we would get at, or will get at, is the ability to engage the community in these buildings is so unique in a way that most communities don't have this kind of property. I mean, even literally sitting in here, there isn't a building like this within a mile of here, besides other churches, right? And so the ability to do community-centric events, classes, support programs, therapy, all that kind of stuff, nobody's ready for that unless you want to go and remodel a building and create that. And the church just has a real opportunity to either give that away in support of the community, or just get rid of their building and go find someplace else to live and let somebody else do something cool in it. So it's challenging for churches, but...
Yeah, and when you look at, so many of the churches in our communities were built in the 50s, 60s, some in the 70s, right? So there weren't as many before that era. And actually, one of the things I found interesting, the church was in decline up until the Second World War, and it was after the war that it had this, this boost and then this baby boom. And so a lot of this is within the last, 70 years, which is, of course, the lifetime of everybody that's around and the memory of everybody. But it hasn't been that way for a long time. And I think one of the things I've been struck by when I hear the stories, from the elders, the community used to come into the church all the time. It was busy all the time. And sometimes I think the pastor just had to sit in his office and just sort of accidentally run into the neighborhood, right? Yeah. And there were events, and there was Boy Scout, and stuff just happened. I don't know that the church did those things. I mean, I think, they did some of them, but there really was this blurry
if it was
line.
The vision, or if it just was naturally happening.
Yeah, they weren't having to come up with strategic teams. They weren't, they were engaging with the community. So I'm not sure we've ever really been good at it, and the context has just changed, but we haven't figured out how to respond to that and how to be that kind of resource now. And especially for us in the Northwest, people are scared of churches a lot of times, or they've had really horrible experiences in churches or with church folks. There's no reason to come in. And so if we're waiting around for people to come, they're just not coming. I think we really have to think about what are we doing and how are the buildings serving us or not.
Good question. Boy, there's a tangent there that I think maybe I don't want to go on, because I want to try and stay focused, but one of the things I think we're hearing in our world is, in response to that, hey, the church needs to go to the people. We need to stop expecting people to come to us. We need to go to the people. I think I don't want to go too far down that rabbit trail, because I do want to talk about, well, hey, even if that is great advice, then we're still sitting on a big empty building 6 days a week, right? I mean, cool, awesome. Now we're going to the people. What are we doing with what we've got here in this space?
Yeah. And I think, kind of going back to your point, it would be interesting to take a look back 70 years and find out just how many churches were in Everett. Because we didn't start with 300 churches in Everett, right? We probably started with 10 good churches or less, and it just expanded to all of the square footage. And so it was like the church was the Grange in a lot of ways, right? Like everybody showed up because the church created enough space for that to happen in. But yeah, I mean, even if we all just went out and did the community thing, we still have 7 days of untaxed land that we're just sitting on and doing nothing with. And people were skeptical of that.
Now.
I'm going to bring it up. It's real. Yeah.
That's it. You said something that I do want to circle back to right away, that these buildings are unique in their possibilities as well. When I think about some of the cool places that have built up in modern society, in terms of what we got right here, particularly now, again, coming out of COVID, I've heard so many people, man, I can't wait to get back to the coffee shop. I can't wait to get back to the wine bar. I can't wait to get back to these places that, again, I think, previous generations are like, well, that's what the church used to be. I'm not sure the church ever used to be that. But you know what? We are not a coffee shop. We have a very unique space, a very unique ability to create different space than what is happening at my very favorite coffee shop. I will happily go and support them. They're not the problem right now.
Yeah.
The problem is we have maybe an opportunity to do something different. And so what do you guys see that being? What can we do within the community that maybe other spaces can't do as well as us?
I mean, I have an answer from my example. I'd love for you to be able to go first.
Well, I'm going to challenge that premise because I think I know where you're going to go, and I'm going to say the first thing that we should do is sell some of them.
Is just sell. Yeah.
I mean, I think I think about our great-grandparents that invested in these properties. They wanted them to serve Christ in the community, right? They wanted faith to be passed on to generations, and so on some level we have to say, are we really being good stewards hanging on when, we're in these $1 million properties that we could free up? So, I mean, part of our work is funded by a grant by a really courageous church in Bellevue that just said we can't hang on anymore and gave away their funds. And there are, 13 projects and another 13 this year that are getting, thousands and thousands of dollars to try something new that never would have been possible. So, I think, so, I mean, I don't think everybody should do that, but I think, right? And I think that would be a big waste. But, when we've got, we could walk to 4 churches in the rain and barely get our shirts wet right now.
Yeah.
And that's true kind of in most places. So just to think about, if we think of the church bigger, it's not just our little congregation, but the church is a movement, and how are we strategic with how we're gathering and where? And so things like sharing spaces or, multiple churches using one building is one way to do that and free up some of these resources.
You keep bringing up tangents. I really want to go. We're going to have a hard time keeping this.
Make a list, Bill.
Thank you.
Well, and I think, so I agree with you, and I think pick any 6 churches, sell 2, engage the community in 2, and worship in 2, and boil all of those down so that the worshiping community ends up in 2 different churches, and they all love each other, and they triple their membership or whatever, and they all get like a $2 million endowment. And then the community gets 2 to do stuff in, which is where my heart and my interest is in using this square footage for community space. I think mental health clinicians could use this space in really unique ways. I think student use, there's plenty of ways that you could do food insecurity programming, you could do mental health care, you could do after-school drop-in, literacy programming. I mean, the sky's the limit. Within walking distance of here, there's 5 different social service agencies that could be in this building doing powerful, meaningful stuff, actual transformative work in the community. And imagine what your congregation could do if they were giving that away and they had a $2 million endowment and their membership had doubled because of relationships that were built with other churches. And people being willing to say, we're ready to live into a new version of our life for the sake of what could be instead of for the sake of what we have to hold on to. So I'll never disagree with your point. And also, there's all kinds of cool stuff.
And what's hard about it, though, is that that's real grief and loss for the people that have been worshiping those buildings and stewarding them, right? So I don't want to be too flip about it.
No.
Because these buildings are invested with prayers and they're invested with ministries and with memories, and it matters, right? So if we could just sort of shuffle the deck, it'd be great, but it's much more complicated than that. So that's where we're talking about repurposing and sharing, I think, really goes a long way. I was really challenged. We have a friend who was a pastor south of Chicago, Riverdale neighborhood, which is a white flight neighborhood, and it's now a very poor, struggling black community. It's a food desert, gang violence, just sort of all the stuff when you think about inner city Chicago, Southside Chicago. And so we went and visited his church as part of a training, and we were kind of, we were doing this, we were young and doing this kind of thing. And Pastor Yehiel, who's now the bishop of Metro Chicago for the Lutherans, he said, this church is an icon for this neighborhood because this church was abandoned by the people who abandoned this neighborhood. And so for us to come in, a black pastor, a black community, and breathe the Spirit back into the space, they walk by and they know that God has not abandoned their neighborhood, right? And I was just like, whoa, right? That blew my mind in a lot of ways. And just that it's still there. And I think, I listen to our elders, and I think there's something of that too, as they experience loss and change in their life, that at least the church is still there. And by that they mean the building still stands as witness. So it's balancing all these things. It's so hard.
So true. Again, another tangent there in terms of one of the best things a church can do, particularly in a neighborhood that is changing, isn't necessarily to sell, but is to figure out how do you change with that neighborhood. I can think of two examples in my world. Quest, both here in Seattle, and then out of the Jesus Collective, a really cool pastor in Philly named Hank Johnson, African-American, who was brought on by a church who was like, hey, this is where we're going, and this is where we want to go. Come on in, Hank, and see where this can go. Yeah, that becomes something really, really cool. Because then, again, the church still has vision. Gets to, I think, what you're talking about. There's still a worshiping community there. There's still something valuable in terms of that. So how do you figure out as a church, all right, are we going to be the one that continues to be the worshiping space? And even still, unless your tradition's way different than mine, you're still worshiping maybe once or twice a week. If you're going to be the worshiping space, you still got to use that building somehow, right? You've still got too much going on there. Is it better to find a ministry partner? Honestly, is it better just to rent out, rent/give space? There's some legal things kind of going on there. There are challenges with all that in terms of time, in terms of energy, and in terms of all that. How do you figure out what's the best path forward?
I'd love to say there was a good answer.
Yeah.
But I mean, all of those things and 11 other different things, right? And it's so based on the context.
It's a lifespan thing.
And it's a lifespan thing too, yeah. And how many, where the community, where the congregation is, what's going on in the neighborhood, what the needs are, who the partners are there. I mean, what already exists, So what would work on this block might not work 4 blocks over.
Truly,
because there's some other resource or something there. So yeah, if you're looking for one answer in 30 minutes, it ain't coming, bro. I don't know. But yeah.
I do think that there's like stepping stones forward though, right? So you mentioned context. I mean, when we started at Faith and started that work, I walked out to my car, turned around and saw an entire school district and just knew this is what we were doing. If I had turned around and seen senior service centers or senior living communities, we would be doing that work. So there's a certain amount of like look up from what you think matters to you right now to see what really actually could matter to you and maybe should matter to you. And that's one of the things that Link has always been about, and one of the things I would encourage and challenge any congregation in is to say, like right now, your focus is right here. I'm worried about Sunday morning. I'm worried about Wednesday night. I'm worried about who's going to bring the Jell-O salad, right? Like we just zero in on what's right in front of us. And if we take a moment to look up and actually look into the community, we will see the need. And start asking good questions. What is it that is happening within walking distance of here, and how can we become a part of that? And then start building those relationships. I mean, it's listening more than anything. Yeah.
Yeah, and trusting that God's already at work in the community, right? And that we're not there to make it up. We're just there to discover it. And so, I mean, this is where partnership comes in. Whatever we're doing, we're partnering across generations. We're partnering with other organizations, with schools, or people that will never join the church, but maybe we share some value and some passion with. I'm working with a church in Michigan right now, and one of the claims that they, one of their challenges is like, we have values that people in the community have, and they don't know that we share these their social justice values, and they would like us if they knew us, but this church thing just really gets in the way. And so as they can kind of say, we're not trying to recruit you into the church, like we're here to do this work together that we both care about, and that has really generated some really interesting shift in perspective, right?
and risk is the thing, right? Like anytime you go into any of these kinds of conversations, you're putting an enormous amount of risk out there, and people have to be willing to step out and be courageous and say, what is the thing that we might be called to? That's terrifying, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
So,
talk to me about the balance about, again, what we, for those of us who are Jesus followers, what we feel called to do, again, making an impact in our community, listening, partnering with those around us, along with, again, this communal worship experience that is also part of what we're called to do. Again, I think we've all been involved in experiences where Christians stop talking about Jesus because they're trying to do some of the work of Jesus, but in so doing, have lost a little bit of the message of Jesus, right? Where's that balance in terms of this as well?
Yeah, and it's the balance, I think, really is the key, right? And so it's really easy, and I mean, you see this with people that are really committed to their work that makes a difference in the world, to social causes, to their, even to their families, and you go all in on that, and you miss this other side, which is how we're filled and equipped and challenged and discipled, right, into this way of Jesus. So if we got to live in this world and then go out and always be back and forth. I mean, one of the things I think is interesting in these kind of new models of church is to say, there might be 1,000 people here during the week, and they're not 1,000 people coming to worship. There's maybe 30 people coming to worship, but those people have been serving and have challenges, and they've seen horrible things, and they've witnessed amazing gifts and horrible pain. That is a really rich, support, engaged, prayerful. I mean, man, we need Jesus at that moment. We're worn out from the work of ministry of the week. So how do we connect in that and help each other and do that work? Jesus was building teams of disciples, and they kept coming back together, right? They'd go out and then they'd come back together to say, okay, we need to go back to the source and focus and get re-centered on what really this is about, so that we don't end up down some path that is not where we're meant to go.
I've in fact, to you, I even call myself a false deacon sometimes. I'm not actually a deacon, but I get to say that. One of the reasons that I think I really lean into that is that there are moments, and I say this on camera, where I don't care. Yeah. There are kids who are going to kill themselves if we don't create space to support them. And I would rather be about creating that healthy space than worry about whether or not I get to push the Jesus card on them. And there are people that are hungry that I may not get the opportunity to feed if I am impressing those things. So that's not to say I don't care and don't value putting that message out there. There are just more times that I don't play the reverend thing and instead play the, what can I do to serve you so that you can find a moment of whole, even just a minute of wholeness. Because oftentimes folks don't get that opportunity, and the church, when it sets that parameter and says, we're going to do this and we're going to add that on, we cheapen it in a lot of ways. So, that's often my challenge. I do value creating healthy, religious, and authentic Jesus space around people. I just think that we oftentimes feel like we have to impress something that isn't necessarily necessary. But I welcome that challenge too. I think, in fact, I've been challenged by folks in our church on that issue, and I'm okay with that. I think it's a wrestling match. It's not it's not a one and done kind of conversation. So.
When it gives us experience to reflect on theologically, and it gives us experiences to connect with what Jesus was up to in the Gospels, right? This wasn't meant to be theoretical. It was meant to be practical learning, right? So really there's an action reflection piece to a lot of this too. And I think the most compelling witness, we need to speak the name of Jesus, but it was the embodiment of it. I think that's what the church is for, is to just be so Jesus-y that people are what's up with you? Why are you so weird? Why do you care so much about this community? And we were like, well, it's Jesus, and he taught us this, and he's still teaching, and you can be part of this too. That's really compelling to me, rather than being like, you need to believe in Jesus. I'm like, no, I don't. I've seen enough of that, and I know what that looks like, and I know how those people act, and I want nothing to do with it. So we can offer a counter witness. But it's that balance, of how do you, where is that, too much or not enough, and and community is where you sort that out.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I feel like I want to tip my hand here a little bit and say, for those people maybe watching, I really generally agree with most everything you guys say. This has been really, really fun, and you guys are saying it way better than I do too, which is really, really good. I'll tell you one of my biggest struggles, like truly, and now actually particularly, again, in the space that I'm at, and trying to figure out how we individually at Hope, and this isn't just a Hope podcast, but our biggest one, my biggest one, is trying to figure out then, okay, so what are we going to do here and do well, and what should we not try and do because somebody around us is doing it better? And again, particularly in my community, for those watching, it's the Everett community. It's a city, but it's a small city. It's not Seattle. Around us, it is still a little bit of a smaller community. I've been pretty fortunate to have been able to build some really cool partnerships with people in our community that are doing really cool ministry. They aren't necessarily religious-based, which means they're able to do some things you're talking about. They're able to get some funds and grants, that like I couldn't apply for. I struggle, How do I just support what the heck they're doing? How do I see a gap maybe that isn't being done and step into that? What is that? Because I am a church and there are things that go along with it. That for me is where I individually am like, man, that's where I get stuck right now.
Well, Ryan talked about this, I think, when he's talking about, like, we're so stuck in our buildings and looking down, right? And we realize that, like, we're not the only church.
Yeah.
And so many churches are competitive, and as churches decline, it's like, oh, we got to hold on to our members. There's only so many out there, right? And, like, if you're going to, like, we're going to sheep steal you.
The population in America is shrinking.
Right? But, exactly, like, where does this come from, right? Yeah. The harvest is plentiful. It's the laborers that are few, right? Yeah. So, but I think, to crack out of that scarcity model on a bunch of different levels, right? And to go, there is an abundance of need, but there's an abundance of gift, and we're part of something bigger, right? And I think, if I was the devil, I say this all the time, if I was the devil and wanted to get rid of the Jesus movement, I would splinter it as much as possible and get every different group thinking they were right and fighting against the other. Like the devil, that would be the perfect strategy to mess up the Jesus movement. And that's kind of what we're doing to ourselves, right? Yeah. Is to say, like, something's going on here. We don't have to reproduce it. And it's not about how many members show up here on Sunday morning. It's about this kingdom work. And I think you're right. But that's a real big mind shift to get into, to see the church is way bigger than our little version of it. And not to say this is bad, but it's part of something bigger. And that's inspiring too, to not just be on our own, but to really be part of a vast international network of hope, right? That is really still moving and growing. That's good. You should call it church.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things that I stand with in our agency right now is I don't want to be an expert in anything. I want to know the experts in everything. And I want our team to specialize, but I also want our team to be able to reach to people that are real good at what they do, instead of trying to make these crazy investments in training and staffing and all of those things that we just shouldn't be making. And I think that the church, you see this with churches that build schools on their property, specifically like K-12 schools. What ends up happening to the church? The entire mission of that church becomes the school. And but you could do that with anything. Build a hospital and your church is going to become a hospital. You build a food pantry and your church is going to become a food pantry. That's happening to a church down the road from here.
It is, in fact.
And I think that that to me is maybe this is part of the sellout, and maybe this is turning the church into a bit of a leech. But I don't think the church has to be the big mission to get involved in big mission. Right? So like a small congregation engaging something that's really functioning well outside and feeding that and nurturing that and getting involved in that, you can build a lot of energy off of something like that, and you don't have to fabricate it inside your building. I'm seeing that happen in our context where we're creating something that this church could never create, but they're showing up regularly and they want to be invested and they want to give and they want to contribute their facility to do that work, and they love it. it. I
and
mean,
they want to feed the kids and engage with them and do that kind of work.
they're all in. And again, that's context-based for us. We happen to have that kind of work. But I don't think that's untrue in other places. If you attach your congregation to something that really matters to them, they'll live into that. And then you don't have to be the pro that runs the whole thing. You get to be the one that shepherds the people that support the one running the whole thing.
And you can let the church be the church and not a social service provider, right? I mean, I think that's the other balance when you can partner like that. So just say, you do what you're good at, we'll do what we're good at, and together we can do what we couldn't do alone.
Yeah. That's great. That's super insightful. Only problem is, of course, my ego thinks I need to
You want to be the pro.
be the pro.
Well, there you go.
Right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Isn't that so many of our traps, though?
Yeah.
If we're being honest. A lot of this just centers around being honest, being self-aware, I think is part of it. It's a little cliche to say cast vision. I think we probably grew up in that time when that was such a buzzword, and now it's a little less so. But it was a buzzword for a reason. I mean, there was depth to that. If particularly to something you said earlier, for most of these churches that probably need to have this conversation, let's be honest, it is an older population. It is a population that has fond memories of ministry that happened. If you can cast a vision for how ministry might happen again, but in a different way, my experience, particularly with the 70-year-olds and the 80-year-olds, is they've got a passion for that. They want to do that. It's the 50s and 60s who want to kind of hang on. No. It's those older folks who are like, man, I've been there. I've seen it all. Let's just do some good. Yeah.
And that's a whole nother podcast too. I mean, you could spend 45
know
minutes
where
on
I'm
life
going.
cycle. Exactly. And I think you're absolutely right. I think when you get to that place where it's time to consider the church's demise, like the not just the decline, but the end, it's an awful lot easier to say, we're done. What's the new thing? Than it is to say, oh, we got a little bit of life left. We still want to go to Cancun. Like it's hard to let go when you have a little bit of energy left. And so I think time is an important piece to that nature. Like there are some churches that just can't let go right now because they got too many fond memories. There's too many communion stains on the floor that they keep looking at and going, I'm not done with that yet,
Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful.
And you mentioned ego, and one of the things I have really learned from our elderly elders is that at some point in your life, you got to give that up, right? Even as a church. And so, I mean, what I see in these 70 or 80-year-olds that we're working with, as long as they've got, a little bit of a vision, they're like, we're willing to let go of stuff we love because we want to see something happen. They've done that work of being an elder and letting go of what's not serving them anymore, and that's so rare. And I always just want to saddle up to people like that, right, and just go teach me, right, because I want to be that free, and I want to be able to give away as much as you do, and it's so beautiful. But we don't honor that, right? And our culture is so much about staying young. For we start with gray hair, but like that's a shameful thing, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, no, give me a gray beard, right? Like I'll take it, but make me wise, God, at the same time, like make it correlate.
To go with it.
But I really think that's part of the work is to do some of that letting go individually, collectively of our stuff so that we can be freed up for that.
That's good. This really has been fun. We're kind of wrapping up our time. I want to say for folks from Hope that may be listening, this was not a precursor to sell the building.
Don't blame us if it is.
Bam, we're out. It actually has been really reaffirming because we are here because of an incredible group of folks that got to a point of saying, hey, we need something new. They've welcomed us in. This place has been revitalized in a lot of ways. We've been able to partner with people around us. But having said all that, particularly now coming out of COVID and quarantine and a chance just to reimagine a little bit, I do want us to think about, all right, so what is next? I don't think it is, selling and doing that. I think those are conversations I'd like to have with some folks around us if they would let me into that. But maybe that is it. Maybe that is part of our job, part of our role to do that. There are things that we aren't doing that I think we need to start doing here, and I look forward to being able to have those conversations with folks here and with some of your insight. Appreciate that.
I think as the church consolidates, it needs a place to consolidate to. And the place that that's going to be has to be welcoming and open to that and understand the pain work that comes in that. So, I mean, get ready to have that conversation with your neighbors, because maybe you're the place that those folks land and heal.
If at some level we were able to do that once already, by bringing two groups together, maybe there's something in our DNA that would allow that to happen again and again, and wouldn't that be cool?
Powerful,
Yeah, cool. Thank you guys. Really
this was great,
appreciate
Bill.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. Yeah, and I don't know, there's like 4 or 5 other podcasts we have to do now. So
See you next week.
that'll be good. That'll be good. Excellent. Thank you all for watching. Again, for those of you outside the church, I really would be curious how you heard that. Maybe there was something in there that inspired you to think that, what we're trying to struggle with and figure out does honor what I think people outside are hoping for us to start doing. So I appreciate that. Those of you at a church, maybe at a church, that needs to consider what happens next. If you wanted to have a really good conversation about that, Ryan has way less gray hair than the other two, so hit him up.
I need more.
That's right.
I'll give you some.
Yeah, let's talk.
Perfect. Awesome. Eric, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
And Ryan, as
Of
always.
course. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. We will see you back here for our next conversation. Thanks so much.